Welcome to Central Valley Writers Workshop. Our great valley is home to many writers who are looking for tips, tools, and techniques and other ways to improve our writing. We hope that you will gain all of these and more as we interview authors and experts on our show. I'm your host, Claudia Newcorn, author of the award-winning fantasy fiction, The Chrysalis Chronicles of Fairy, editor of Stanislaus Magazine, and Modesto Bee Community columnist. With us today is Gerry Avila, author of Table of Hearts, a wonderful story with generational fiction which chronicles the experiences of 3 generations. Gerry, thank you so very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Gerry, would you be good enough to share with us a bit about your background and what inspired you to write this book?
I come from the valley here, born and raised here, but I had a school teacher, a high school school teacher, sophomore year, that she asked the class to write a 3-page story about current event of your personal event. So we did, the whole class, and I wrote on my first date, which was a mistake because she told me that I would have to read this in front of the class. I told her, I says, Mrs. Hunt, I can't do this. The school, I'll be a laughingstock at the school. And I says, I won't do it. And she says, you have no choice. So she picked 4 out of the class, and I was putting it off. Every Friday, one would speak. And at the last Friday, she told me, she says, this is it. I told her, I says, give me one more week. She gave me one more week. And I came into class, and I started to read it. I left out 3 paragraphs. I have never seen a teacher get so mad.
Right there in the class?
She exploded.
Really?
She was so mad. She grabbed my 3 pages and threw it in the waste paper basket. I mean, she was just mad. And I told her, class left, and I told Mrs. Hunt, I says, I can't do this. And she says, you don't know what you have done. She says, the whole school would have loved it. And I says, but I would be an embarrassment. I says, I won't do it. I says, I can't. And I says, and I'm pulling those 3 pages out of the waste paper basket because I don't want anybody else to see that. From that time on, she told me, she says, the day will come when you have to write. Mm-hmm. I dedicated the book to her, and I wrote in the book almost verbatim what she said. And a few years later, she was still staring at me. Anywhere we went, she'd stare, a dead stare. And I says, Mrs. Hunt, I says, what are you doing to me? I says, I don't want to write. And she says, the day will come. And then after a few years, she kind of forgot about it. And when I turned 55, these words haunted me the whole up to 55. And I started writing a screenplay just for fun in the winter. And it was always around November that I would want to write. So I started writing, and she was murdered. Her and her husband were both murdered. The grandson killed them both. Oh. And I threw it away. It was really emotional. And about it was almost a year later, and I started writing again, but I wrote about half of this, not quite half of this.
Half of Table of Hearts?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And my brother was killed.
Oh, Gerry.
So I threw it away again. That's why this book took 11 years, because it's a bad thing to write for a long period of time. And the book took 11 years, and too many things happened in 11 years. And it became so emotional to me that, because I wanted to release everything I had in me. And that's why I wrote the book, to get rid of it. And I figured this would be the last book. And Mrs. Hunt would not haunt me anymore, and it'd be over. Well, the minute I got halfway through this book, my next book was already going through my brain, and I was, oh no, don't let it happen again. And I got down to the last 2 chapters of this book, and I stopped. I didn't want to finish it.
Why?
It's like I knew once I finished it, it's like letting your kid leave your house to go on his own. My book was going to go out to the general public. It was my book. I didn't want anybody to have my book. I really didn't. I wanted to throw it in the drawer and go back to it every year and read it. And it was for me.
Almost the same way when you were in school. You didn't want anybody to see
No,
your story. No way.
No. Because a few people have said, now we know something about you.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you can't hide it. When you're writing, a lot of stuff comes out. And it's true. It's like a confession.
Now, when you wrote Table of Hearts, one of the things you shared with me is it covers 3 generations.
Yeah.
What inspired you to write this particular story and create a saga, not just focus on one period of time, but cover 3 periods of a family's history?
Well, I was at a young age going to Dean Witter Stock Market on 13th Street in Modesto, and I met these old guys, and nobody in my class or even when I started college that knew that I was even doing this. I was buying stock. My uncle would sign over because I was underage, and I got to know a lot about stocks, and these old guys would teach me all these things, and even Don Sutton, which was one of the big names in stocks here, took me as his client, and which, these old guys couldn't believe it, and so there was a little preferential treatment there for me. And we went on and on like that. So when I started to write the book, I wanted to write about the first thoughts of day trading. It wasn't called day trading, but that was my idea of manipulating the market. And so I kind of felt like I was maybe too smart. If I put it in the book, how could a kid know that much about something? So I says, I'm going to have to go back in history, family, where they kind of built up this momentum for that kid to learn all this. And that's why I went back 2 generations, brought him over as an immigrant, which was, he wanted to work at it. He was one of those, wanted to be American. And that's how I brought him in the story.
Now, as you say, 3 generations. One of the things in my experience in reading that type of fiction is language, the environment, things going on in the society change over time. Did you have to do research or any efforts to make sure you clearly captured those periods of time as an author?
I did quite a bit of research, location and how he migrated out of that area and onto what ship, what type of ship, that kind of thing, and coming into New York, Ellis. I had to learn all this, but even the streets of New York, how he moved around from one. How did he get that far? One guy says, there's no way he could have walked that distance. And I says, oh, okay. So I rode in horse carriage, gave him a lift, a little milk cart. And he says, now it works. So those kind of things. But as far as the grandfather, he was Elam Godzinski. Godzinski comes from a name. Why I picked Poland was when I was back in Scranton, Pennsylvania in the Army, Polish community. I loved those people. I mean, I went with a girl, the Godzinski family. I got the name. I stole the name. And I called the guy Elam so nobody else would know. And because Elam, I had never heard it before, and so I just used Elam. And these people, I wrote to a few, and they said, "You don't write? I've never seen you write." And all my friends, the squad in the Army, that type of thing, they never saw me writing. Everything that I did is private.
Okay.
I just didn't release any stuff that I did.
This was the hidden side of you, the writer.
Logging, daily stuff, it was all my private stuff. Because I put names in there I didn't want anybody else to see. And the story grew from there with the Godzinski family.
You talk about doing the research so that you can bring the texture to the story. In your opinion, because not only do you have this book, but you're now working on a second one, what are important characteristics of this type of fiction that need to be there to help pull the reader along?
I used props.
How so?
The guy was an ice skater in Poland. The kid, he was 19 when he came over, but he was a speed skater and a hockey player. Those skates stayed in the story all the way through. It was, it was taken from New York, it was taken to Sonoma, and it was put in the office. They were hanging there. Mm-hmm. It was his trademark, the grandfather's trademark, and the desk is the original desk that the grandfather had in New York. The little desk that the little kid, Georgie, that was his little desk. That was there too. It came over to Sonoma. That's the only things they brought. And it was, from there, it was the grandson came into the picture and became a whiz kid. Mm-hmm. There was a contest, gave me that idea. There was a contest when I was a kid. I just started with Dean Witter, maybe 17, and it was a contest for $10,000.
Wow.
And I had already planned on what stocks I was going to buy with the $10,000. And I says, I told Don Sutton, I says, I'm going to enter the contest, and I'll probably win if you give me the right companies to work with.
Hey, wait a moment, that's called insider trading today.
And he said, well, let's go with high tech. And I says, in those days, it wasn't high tech yet. And I says, what kind of high tech would you go with? And so I went down the list of high tech. I bought most of them. And oil stocks won. But in my book, Godzinski won.
Okay, so you're really bringing a lot of your personal experience into
Yeah.
creating a lot of the depth and texture in the story. Did you do an outline for the story, plot, characters? How did you map it out before you started writing? Because it's a pretty thick book.
I didn't. I did notes. Mm-hmm. What I do is when I go to bed a half hour earlier than I'm sleepy. And I don't want to go to bed and start thinking about writing. I don't want to write. But I go to bed thinking about direction. Mm-hmm. Which way am I going to go on this thing? And I know what I want to talk about already in my brain. So I start with the issue, and I say, all right, which way would we go with this type of thing? Left, right, up, straight up, go on with the story. And I set the premise for the next time I write. The plans are already made before I sit down to write. I know I start on Wednesday preparing for Saturday's write when I'm off.
By thinking about it in advance
Yeah.
and kind of structuring it in your head?
It's building, it's growing. And by the time I get to Saturday, I'm so itchy to write and so ready that it's just a joy. It's almost, it's emotional. It goes through the whole spectrum. It just tears me up sometimes.
So do you write only once a week, or are you writing every day?
I've got another quirky thing. I start with music.
Uh-huh.
I can't do it without starting some music. The stereo goes up to 10 or 12, high. And I used Pearl Harbor theme song to Pearl Harbor. I must have run that thing 600 times. I mean,
Really?
just insane, But I can't have anybody in the house because I got that thing jacked up, and I've got my door closed and it's hot in there, and I got the fan on, but I just that song, and then when Faith Hill sings that first song, and then it goes into the kettle drums, I just, okay, now we're gonna attack, you know.
So you have created this whole motivational sequence. You just
That
hammer
did-
at it.
I can't use. I'm trying now during Christmas because I wrote a lot in the second book during Christmas, and I tried Christmas songs. No, doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
No.
When you're describing this, Jerry, you remind me of George Lucas. I saw an interview with him, and he talked about how, as he was screenwriting and creating the story for Star Wars, he'd play different types of music before he started writing to create the mood and the motivation, and
It's
then
gotta grow.
project it on
Yeah.
paper. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. In addition, now, so there you are, you've prepared yourself, you've got this amazing music going on around you. Then do you tone it down and sit down and start writing? How do you motivate yourself now to take the story that's been fermenting in your head for several days and put it down on paper?
I need one sentence, maybe even 3 words. Once I get those 3 words, I'm rolling. The 3 words just they've got to come to me. If that doesn't come, I don't even stay there. You know, I'm not ready.
Okay.
I get up and I go.
You're an experienced author. I mean, you've got 1 book published now. You're going to be working on a second book. Now that you know what it's like to write and publish a book, would you share with our audience, are there things you would have done differently now that you know better, or as they would say, older and wiser?
What I would do differently than this book?
Differently, if you were to rewrite it.
Size-wise, I would definitely do it differently.
How so?
Which the editor thought he could get it down to 400 pages, and he couldn't. So that was, in my view, it was a compliment, because the editor can't get it down. I mean, he's a Stanford fellow. Why couldn't he get it down? He's in literature, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, if he can't get it down, I'm satisfied. But this book has so much in here that, I mean, I can open up every 3rd page, and like my sister said, I see you all over this book.
Fingerprints.
She says, I can see you when I'm reading this, that it's you.
Uh-huh.
And I says, well, it's me.
Looking for an elegant restaurant with a personal touch? Open Tuesday through Sunday, Sips Bistro and Wine Shop offers daily specials from their lunch and dinner menus. Fine dining, fine wine, and personal service. Sips Bistro and Wine Shop is the perfect location. Sips Bistro and Wine Shop, 901 Carpenter Road, Suite 39, Modesto. Quality, experience, integrity. Countryman's Village Jewelers, in business over 40 years, exemplifies these characteristics with timeless classics to custom designs. Countryman's Village Jewelers features gifts for this holiday season at under $100. Countryman's Village Jewelers in McHenry Village, the jeweler you can trust.
And we're back with Central Valley Writers Workshop and author Gerry Avila, author of Table of Hearts. Gerry, you've got a lot of characters in this book. Can you share with us a bit, what did you need to do to develop your characters and create their unique personalities in the story?
The personalities grew with time. As I wrote, I had to go back on some of them, like past girlfriends, her husband, Mr. Irrelevant. I had to go back and kind of work the characters so they were bigger than life and actually more fun. I like good people. When I write, I favor good people.
Okay.
And I prefer writing longer stretches of people that are just nice. The bad guys in the book, politicians, they didn't get any help from me. I mean, I gave them what they deserved.
You really did bring your personal experiences into
yeah,
writing.
yeah.
It sounds almost cathartic when you're writing about these characters. So I have visions, you have people in your head, and you're like, okay, I'm going to get you good now when I'm writing. Will you tell us a bit about the second book you're working on?
The second book is Home for Good, and it's totally different. I didn't want, because there's going to be a sequel on this, but I'm giving them a rest. Gojinskis are getting on my nerves.
The characters have come very alive for you.
Oh, hey, believe me, they are alive. I mean, when my wife the other day was getting upset about something, I says, Renee would never do what you're doing. She would be smiling and trying to work with me on this. And she says, Renee who? I says,
Uh-oh.
I says, Renee Gojinski. And she says, oh, gosh, get the book out of your head.
So Home for Good is not a sequel, it's a totally separate book?
Totally different. It starts out in Litchfield, Connecticut. And he's a writer. He's written 27 books. And his wife is a children's book writer, and he's trying to write. She died, and he's trying to write her book. And he can't. He went about not even three quarters of the way through. He's totally done. He can't go. And there's a reason why he can't do it. A psychologist comes into the picture, Joan Steele, and she starts talking to him about this, trying to get it out of him. He doesn't even know it, and he doesn't even know the reason why he can't write the rest. But Joan was only supposed to be half a chapter. She has taken over the book. That woman is just destroying me. I mean, she's going to go all the way through the book now, and she wasn't supposed to be there.
Do you find, I found a similar thing. I have a character who I think is only going to be a bit character, and they become so important, they take on a life of their own, like you're saying.
She's running me.
Literally?
Yes. She has taken over. I mean, sometimes I'll write notes to myself. I mean, this is bordering on the line of,
You're an author. No excuses needed.
Okay. Well, I'll write on there, Joan, if you don't get out of this room today, I'm going to rip you out of the book totally. It's just crazy.
Well, this leads to an important question. As you know, we have a lot of people who are watching the show who either are also authors or are looking to write and develop their own stories. What advice would you give them about writing your generational fiction or other types of books that will help them become better writers?
The personal experiences generate a lot of things in your brain. If you don't have, and everybody has them.
Mm-hmm.
My contention is everybody can write a book. I don't care who it is, they can write. If they can write a 3-page letter, 2-page letter, 1-page letter, they can write a book. And my like people have told me, oh, you've written a book. I said, don't call me a writer until I've written 3.
Why do you say that?
I don't feel I'm a writer, not yet. When I have written my 3rd one, I says, you can put me on the shelf. I says, before that, this is just a fun thing for me. So.
But it's a lot of work. I mean, as you say.
I don't feel it's work at all.
But what you say, don't call me a writer until I've written the 3rd book. Why?
Well, it's putting me up too high, putting me up on a pedestal. I haven't earned it. One book hasn't earned it. For
Okay.
Me. Like a screenplay. I mean, I won an Academy Award for screenplay writing. I want to write, and that's the goal that I have set.
Okay.
For my Santa Barbara Cove. That's going to be the screenplay, I think. And it's pretty rough. It's a rough story. But
obviously, you told me before we started interviewing, you have something like 4 books bubbling up there in your head
it's
already.
Terrible. But it's terrible because if I didn't finish Home for Good, and I start thinking about the sequel to this, it starts overtaking me, and I lose interest. I know
Okay.
where the story is going on Home for Good. I know the whole story, right down to the last. It's just not on paper, and I don't want to get distracted, but I don't want to finish the book either, because then I got to let it go, leave the roost.
The next one.
Yeah, leave home. I just don't want it to leave home. My book is my book. I'm possessive.
But by your very nature as being an author, I don't think you're going to have a choice in the
I
matter.
know. I realize that. I realize that.
Well, I want to thank you because you've shared a lot of your personal experiences as an author, and I think people are going to learn a lot from what you've done in writing this type of fiction, research, creating the mood, the structure, so that people have a sense of progress. I love that pointer you brought in of carrying certain visual devices through the whole story,
Yeah.
the skates and the desks. I'd like to invite you to join our authors and pull the pineapple
Okay.
and add your book to our collection.
All right.
And I'm anticipating we'll have you back on the show as the next book comes out, because you'll have even more to tell
These
us
are thick.
about. They are. They're also hollow.
Oh, okay.
But I want to thank you very much for being with us here today, Gerry. I've learned a lot in listening to you. Thanks to our audience for hearing Gerry speak about his first book, his debut book, Table of Hearts, and learning about what's involved in writing generational fiction. If you'd like to learn more about Gerry's book, please visit the KAZV TV website, where you'll be able to learn more about him and his story. Until then, thank you very much for being with us on the Central Valley Writers Workshop, and we look forward to seeing you at our next show. Have a great day.